Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:37 on this 6th day of January and a snow day to boot, but that's not going to stop the proceedings on Capitol Hill as we are scheduled to have a quorum in the House of Representatives and the certification of the 2024 Electoral College election. Coming up at 7:05, Joe DeGeneva will talk about any legal challenges that may be brought up. Then at 7:35, Trevor Maddich on the Commanders' victory yesterday and what the playoffs look like. 8:05, Pat Harity running for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. Also, throughout the entire morning, we'll be speaking with representatives of the various state highway patrols or state highway administrations and roadworks personnel from across the entire D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. The kids call it the DMV, Julie, to give you details on getting into work or getting into wherever you need to go for your duties today. And if you don't have a duty in town, then stay home, okay? That's your duty. I'm Larry O'Connor, and as mentioned, that's Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie. Our guest right now knows a thing or two about duty. He was the chief of police for the United States Capitol Police from 2019 to 2021 until he tendered his resignation to Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, after the events of January 6, 4 years ago. That said, his story, sadly, is not as well known as it should be because, well, Liz Cheney and the January 6th committee didn't want to hear his story, didn't want to hear all of the facts surrounding that day. But you can get the truth in his book, Courage Under Fire, Under Siege and Outnumbered 58-1 on January 6th. Stephen Sund, Chief, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Julie and Larry.
It's got to be hard on this day because you've got to go right back to that moment where you reckon, well, frankly, let's go before things started getting dicey on January 6th. You knew the odds were stacked against you. You knew, everybody knew that protest was then going to turn into a protest and march on Capitol Hill. How early did you ask for National Guard and other types of reinforcements so that you could have the personnel in place for what you expected to be a very large protest at the Capitol?
I remember that specifically. It was 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, January 3rd, that I went and asked Speaker Pelosi's Sergeant-at-Arms for the use of the National Guard, specifically because I knew I only had 273 officers to put on a very large perimeter, and was denied over the concern for optics. Think about that.
Optics. Right. And then, of course, as things started to get ugly on January 6th, you were in constant contact with those who were in authority that could call in for more people. Who did you speak with the Speaker herself that day, or was it the Sergeant-at-Arms that was your main point of contact?
It was always the Sergeant-at-Arms. The Sergeant-at-Arms always was a conduit. He was a very strict controller of direct conversations with the Speaker. And just to take your listeners back a little bit, I know we've talked about it. There was a specific law that required me by law. I had to go through the Sergeant-at-Arms, the Capitol Police Board, to request any support from my officers, even while we're under attack. So on January 3rd, I asked multiple times, was denied twice on January 3rd. And even while we're under attack, from 12:53 on, I asked 11 times and was denied for 71 minutes to bring in any resources from my officers until 2:09 p.m. Think about that, just 5 minutes before the first person broke into the Capitol. But I went ahead and started calling every law enforcement agency leader I knew to come to my aid.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to be clear here, because Representative Loudermilk of Georgia, he's come out with sort of a follow-up report on the January 6th committee, and it appears as though the Pentagon, well, you tell me, because it sounds like you were mischaracterized and actually not allowed to speak and tell the truth about that day.
That is absolutely correct. You go all the way back, even within days of January 6th, I wrote a 8-page letter to members of leadership in Congress. I had to send it twice before I even got one response from a chief of staff, and only got one response. Fought to testify in February 2021 before the Senate Select Committee. They didn't even want me to testify there. And then the Select Committee was formed over on the House side, Nancy Pelosi's Select Committee. I waited. Finally, got in touch with them. I was allowed to come in and do a transcribed interview. 6 hours I interviewed with them, And it got very contentious because they didn't want anything about the denial of resources in advance or denial while we're under attack to even come up at all. They said that completely was not leadership's fault. It absolutely was. Paul Irving did not want to go to Speaker Pelosi, or he did and was getting denied as well because of her concern for optics as well. She was concerned about the look of National Guard on the Hill. So that's how that ties in. And then when you look at what went on with the Pentagon, even while we're under attack, so I finally get approval at 2:09. I've already called the National Guard. I called William Walker at 1:49 p.m. Said, hey, we need dire help. Even though it's a violation of federal law, I went ahead and called them and said, please send me everything you got. I wasn't getting approval. I said, I'll have approval any minute. Even once I got approval at 2:09, I called them and said, hey, we have approval. The Pentagon, and then I had to get on with the phone with the Pentagon at 2:34 p.m. and explain to General Piatt, that we need immediate assistance. He's watching the same stuff I'm seeing on TV, the people attacking the Capitol. And I told him we had people inside the Capitol. This was right before the shooting. And he told me, no, I don't like the optics. Same thing, Paul.
Optics.
I don't like optics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about...
They continued. I'm sorry, Chief. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, even when we had the shooting at 2:43, I'm still on the phone with them. I'm like, is it urgent enough for you now? We have a shooting inside the Capitol. Still weren't sending them.
They were upset. They continued to be obsessed with optics, and that was, I mean, you could say that was the entire Liz Cheney, Benny Thompson committee was trying to push this narrative. Obviously, you know that, and they had video. Loudermilk's report actually goes into this, how the committee had video of Nancy Pelosi taking responsibility, and yet they didn't release that. They didn't make that public. That later was made public when the Republicans took over. What was your reaction when you saw that video?
I'm glad it came out. I was really surprised that she actually had a film crew with her. It was actually her daughter. I was kind of surprised about that, but needless to say, I'm glad that they were able to get HBO to release some of that video, and that made me feel a whole lot better when she mentioned it. They also talk about the demands from some of her staff for my resignation, and I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it was good to see that. It was good to see that finally come out. But when you look at it and everything I went through with the select committee and the investigations, I wasn't surprised. They spent over a year investigating, tens of millions of dollars with that whole production, focused on this thing, putting responsibility squarely on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue on the president.
Yep.
So
Trump.
I was happy that
Trump and his supporters. We're speaking with Stephen Sund. He was the chief of police on Capitol Hill for the Capitol Police. And, we keep talking about how Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson, who just got an award, by the way, Chief Sund, which is from President Biden for their committee, how they never hear. But it should also be pointed out, have you been on Jake Tapper, George Stephanopoulos, Anderson Cooper, Nora O'Donnell? I mean, does anyone in the media, other than this show, Tucker Carlson, a couple of other Fox shows have had you on, right?
Yeah, Tucker's had me on. Brett Baer's had me on. Actually, I was on with Jake Tapper a while back. I was on actually with Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC, which is kind of. Yeah, so they've a number of those have covered it. Actually, she was in tears when she heard about what was happening with the National Guard, because it's interesting. Mm-hmm. People talk to me and they say, "Well, hey, how do you talk to these different people?" I tell the truth. You're going to get the truth no matter who I talk to. I don't care if you're liberal, Democrat, Republican, right wing, whatever. You're going to get the exact same thing. So it's easy because the truth is easy.
I have no idea what your party affiliation is, although I do know you listen to our show. But that we're open to everybody here. We love all parties listening. Chief, can you stay with us, because there's a question about this whole pipe bomb thing. The FBI has now put out this video. Suddenly they're interested in who planted the pipe bombs again. I want to hear your opinion on that in a moment at 6:40. And we continue now with Stephen Sund. He was the chief of the U.S. Capitol Police for several years, leading right up until the events of January 6, 2021. And Chief Sund, I've seen this FBI put out this surveillance video of who they allege to be the person who planted that pipe bomb. It's curious timing suddenly, 3 days before the anniversary of January 6. They've got this renewed interest, and now, I mean, they've had to have had this security footage for quite some time. What's going on with the FBI and this whole pipe bomb thing?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I've always felt once they identify whoever placed those pipe bombs on the night before, on January 5th, That's going to be a huge puzzle piece to this. And you would have thought that would have been full court press. I think we had information come out saying that the FBI was investigating it. Because you see the person on a cell phone while they're putting it down, so you can link it right to a cell phone, right to a specific area, geo-track that. But we're told the information was corrupt, the data was corrupt. Now, when Barry Loudermilk's group's looking into it, the phone company saying no one even came to us for that information. Yet they're geofencing everyone else that's on Capitol ground. So it's very interesting. I know there's been a number of other reporters that have been out there pushing for more information coming out on the pipe bomb, but for them to up it to $500,000 just a couple days, like you said, before the anniversary, I find that interesting. I'm really surprised with all the footage down there, and that being one of the most secure areas in Washington D.C. They haven't been able to solve this yet.
Yeah, and there was also footage of this person who set them down. Actually, it looks like he's waving to a police vehicle that passes. Very confusing. I think this also, I'd love to get your opinion on how, the American public, they don't, in some cases, they don't trust law enforcement anymore. I mean, this from the Department of Justice on down. How do you feel about that, about Americans' distrust of law enforcement, and again, not just sort of the feds, but to the local cop on the beat?
It's for me. I'm a rule of law type of guy. I think you've known about me about that the whole time. We're out there to provide a service, and there has to be trust with the community for that to work. So it's a shame when people begin to lose faith in that. And I've seen that video where the person drives by and it looks like he waves at a police officer. The police officer goes down, pulls in late, then turns back around because I think the police officer was saying, "Hey, there's somebody looking like they're looking in cars in the area." So they're actually dispatched out to very specifically, I think, looking for this individual. Turns around, comes back out, and I think has her overhead lights kind of flashing a little bit. Comes out, and then that guy ducks. Then the guy ducks into an alley and disappears. So it may just be coincidence, but it leads to people that are looking for answers. When you don't get answers, people are going to look for elsewhere. And I think that on it.
And when people like you, obvious experts on issues like this, I mean, you were the chief. When your voice, they don't even care to talk to you, and they try to keep your side of the story. You were the chief of police at the U.S. Capitol Police that day, and why you're not the star witness of this hearing, I'll never know. But listen, we're happy to have you on days like this, on any days when this story, and this story is not going away. President Trump and Kash Patel, the incoming FBI director, they've said that they want more information about that day because, the one thing we can all agree on, what happened on January 6th was bad and it should never happen again, but you only are able to keep it from happening again if you actually know the truth about it. Stephen Sun, I appreciate you continuing to try to tell the truth about it, and you'll always have a platform right here, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I certainly appreciate it. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Larry.
Again, his book is Courage Under Fire, and you should get it so you can be educated and informed on what's going on in our country.